BRUCAST is back, baby.
This BRUCAST episode is brought to you by the BRUCAST Store. Explore a store filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered. Stay in style with BRUCAST. Embrace the shock, set the trend. Visit now brew-cast.com/store. Link below. Alright, hi everyone, welcome back to another BRUCAST episode. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please rank the show 5 stars. This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. BRUCAST also on Instagram, X, and TikTok, where I upload shorts with the highlights of the show. So follow now, BRUCAST on Instagram, X, and TikTok. Links on the description below. Hey there, BRUCAST fans, you know what time is it? It's time for the amazing giveaway. Yes, it is. We gave one of those beauties away already a few months ago, and we're doing it again. It was a huge success. If you subscribe now, you might win this wonderful, sexy, beautiful cap at the end of January 2025. So subscribe now. It's very easy. That's all you have to do, and you might get it. All right, that's the giveaway. Subscribe. We have a very special guest. So her name is Jill Sitnick. All right. How are you doing, Jill?
I'm doing great. I didn't realize I'd be competing against a competition to get a cap, but I'm going to do the very best that I can here.
Thank you. Please subscribe. All right, Jill. So I'm very eager to get to know you, get to know what you do. So let's start with this question. How can I improve my life by taking drugs?
Well, if you are taking psychedelics in a therapeutic environment and with a therapeutic goal, healing your trauma can completely change your perspective and make you live a life that's full of joy versus fear and anger or addiction or any of those other mental health ailments that we have. So that probably wasn't the answer you were expecting, but that's a great way to respond to an open-ended, how can we take drugs to feel better?
Sounds like a healthy answer. So my follow-up question would be, since when this practice became, well, a thing?
Well, if you're super interested in the history of psychedelics, I can't recommend enough the book How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan, because he does a beautiful job of talking about in the mid 1900s there was quite a bit of research going on around LSD, MDMA, and fundamentally in the 60s counterculture, the 70s war on drugs that expanded into the 80s. Most of that research stopped. But when you think about researching mental health conditions with psychedelics, you have to talk about, the mid 1900s. There was quite a bit of resurgence in the early 2000s, and we've seen a good number of clinical trials. There were over 200 clinical trials on clinicalgov.com. I think I just butchered that name, but you can just do a search. It's basically where clinical trials are listed in the US. And just recently in August, after 3 clinical trials of MDMA, street names Molly or ecstasy, MDMA for PTSD got delayed by the FDA, which was a little weird. There was probably a whole bunch of reasons for that, but we have a lot of other companies that have learned a lot from that delay and are reorganizing some of their clinical trials so that some of the paperwork that was faced in August won't be faced again. So it's kind of a 1950s, 60s, 70s war on drugs kind of put a damper on things, resurgence in the 2000s, and we're at the point where we're seeing companies with phase 2 and phase 3 clinical trials now.
Ooh, wow, so it's been a while. What are the differences between phase 2, phase 3? What are those?
Usually, I'm not an expert on this. Usually, it's a matter of it's an FDA process,
Oh.
so have to kind of hit certain dot your I's, cross your T's, a collection of data. I've never been a part of a clinical trial, so I can't speak to what the differences are. My fundamental guess is that you would never want to roll something out to the whole U.S. based on one clinical trial of like 20 people. So I think it's to really make sure that the testing parameters are correct, a broader group of people, and oversight along the way. But I'm not an expert in clinical trials, so somebody way smarter could give you probably a way better answer.
Well, but it makes sense, right? First, if you have an unknown drug or you don't know all the symptoms, it totally makes sense to have first like a smaller group, and then if everything works well, we expand a little bit and expand a little bit more. So
Yeah.
I would assume is that I don't know, but wow. And when did you become interested in this subject?
Well, it was very personal for me. I fell into MDMA therapy for PTSD in my late 40s when I was shocked to be diagnosed with PTSD from unhealed childhood trauma. I had lost my partner of over 20 years when Carl passed away. And about 18 months after his passing, I experienced a panic attack for no real reason. It was like off of a work email. And that panic attack wouldn't go away for months. I was hypervigilant. I was suicidal. I just absolutely knew that I was going to be in poverty like within a month. It was a really, really weird experience. And I went back to the therapist that I had chosen to work with to help with my grief work. And for the first time, we started talking about some of my childhood stuff that, I'm Generation X. I didn't have a great childhood, but lots of people had it way worse, is kind of always the way I thought about it. And so when my symptoms wouldn't go away through talk therapy and through a Wellbutrin antidepressant prescription, I was ultimately diagnosed with PTSD. And then I learned that she was in a program, my therapist was in a program to become a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist. And if I was interested in working with the therapy that at the time was in the phase 2 trials, because this is a couple of years ago, so they had just published phase 2 research, where like 2/3 of the people who went through the trial no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. So I had this beautiful opportunity in front of me to work with my therapist with an evidence-based treatment. And what we were doing traditionally with the talk therapy and the antidepressants wasn't working. So that's how I became interested, because I was a patient. I went through the therapy for a year, 3 therapeutic journeys over the course of a year.
Wow, 3 therapeutic journeys through the period of 1 year. So you had 3 different therapists?
No. Same therapist and guide. So the protocol for MDMA therapy is for each patient, you have 2, I'm going to use the word facilitators or practitioners. Most of the time, they are therapists or people who've been trained in mental health conditions. Sometimes you might have like an expert in medical. You might have a real expert in the medicine, especially when it's happening underground. Like my therapy happened underground. I was not part of a clinical trial. And so that protocol is that journey day, and the journey day is with you and the psychedelic and the 2 practitioners. That cycle happened for me 3 times over the course of a year. And at the end of the 3rd cycle, that's when I no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. I was no longer suicidal.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
that's potent. Like that's big news. So 1 year of talk therapy and the symptoms were not going away. And for how many months with the MDMA therapy you had to went through to get fully rid of all the symptoms?
Yeah, let's reverse that. It was a couple of
A
months
couple of months.
from when I had that panic attack,
Yeah.
and then went back to my therapist. That was a couple of months.
Ah.
When I got the diagnosis and agreed to the therapy, We then took a few more months. So I agreed to the therapy in maybe March or April. We didn't have the first therapeutic journey with MDMA until September. It took me that long, weekly or biweekly talk therapy, to really figure out what the problems were. Everything was deeply rooted in fear. My father was a pretty terrible person, and my childhood was full of neglect. So there was a lot of fear that kept coming up. So I also had to wean off of the Wellbutrin. And so from like April-ish through September, we prepared for that first journey. I think it's also important to realize I was not an experienced drug user. I had tried ecstasy once in my life and couldn't wrap my brain around how ecstasy was actually going to be therapeutic. But I was not an experienced person with drugs. So there was that apprehension. I had all the stereotypes my entire life of like the egg in the frying pan and drugs are going to destroy your brain. So I had to kind of work through those fears. And so my first journey was September. My second journey was December. My third journey was May, because my doctors basically let me, through talk therapy, kind of work things out. And they didn't push me that, oh, you're ready for another journey. It was up to me to say, I'm ready for another journey. I'm ready. I know what I need to work on. So that's how that year unfolded.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's so interesting. And let's say I have PTSD.
Yep.
And I want to go through those journeys and have MD, like how'd you mention again? Psychotherapy. What's the term?
Psychedelic-assisted.
Psychedelic-assisted therapy.
Psychotherapy. Yep.
Psychotherapy. I would have to find a specific therapist who do that.
Yes.
Right. You're lucky that your therapist was already doing that. We're planning to start doing that. So.
Yes.
What would be the process for someone who wants to start doing that? They just look up on Google, like how easy it is to find this. Well, I would assume first you need to know for sure that you have PTSD, right? I think a lot of people don't even know that they don't have the diagnosis that they have PTSD.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the very first thing is to get yourself in a therapeutic relationship. The hallmarks of PTSD are a hypervigilance, an intense fear that's really unfounded. Your brain knows that fear is not, nothing's really ever going to happen, but your body feels like you're constantly being chased by some wild animal. Your body's reactions don't match the reality that's in front of you. Very often suicidal thoughts are a symptom of PTSD. Not talking about what is causing the PTSD. Like I would never talk about the fear, not talking about your childhood, not talking about maybe in battle something happened, or if you were unfortunately very like attacked, like not talking about it is also another really strong sign. But the first thing that I recommend for anybody is to get in a therapeutic relationship. Psychedelics for mental health are not turnkey. They are much faster than just plain talk therapy. I say talk therapy is like the horse and buggy on the country road, and psychedelics with therapy are kind of like the zippy sports car. But that sports car is not going to go anywhere if you don't have therapeutic help. So the very first thing is get a therapeutic relationship, get a diagnosis, know what you're dealing with, because the other side is that people who have personality disorders and people who have a history of schizophrenia in their families or themselves should 1,000% stay away from psychedelics. So you really don't want to just jump into this. You want to make sure you have a proper diagnosis. Then you can start networking the same way that you would maybe want to find a pickleball coach, or you would want to find an expert chef to teach you how to do something. The first thing you do is you go where those people are, and that's different networking groups. And every social media every social media platform, you can start to find those groups. You can also do internet searches for psychedelic assisted therapy. In the US right now, ketamine therapy is legal. That's usually for depression. So if you start to network with some of those folks, it's not uncommon that they know other folks who are doing different medicines. And because this is not regulated, as a consumer, you should not be going into this in any sort of crisis state, because you need to interview who you want to work with and treat them as a medical professional. So all those questions you would ask a doctor if you're going in for surgery. What are your credentials? How long have you been practicing? Can I talk to a prior patient? Where is this going to happen? All those questions that are normal for a medical procedure, those are the questions you should be ready to ask. And if you're in a crisis state, you're not even going to really hear the answers. You're just going to be like, I need a solution. I need a solution. And that is the wrong state to be looking for this kind of therapy.
I'm sorry, I was drinking water. So
I should have talked a little longer. I'm sorry.
that's okay. So from what I can see, one does not replace the other. They complement each other.
1,000%. This is not replacing a therapist. Very often, if you are in a trauma state, you're going to need a therapist to help you through some really tough emotions.
All right. Yeah. Oof. And so how different? So how would you describe yourself after those before and after those 3 sessions? Like, how much was the transformation?
Huge.
Huge.
Huge. I went from before the PTSD attack, I was big tech. I was working at Microsoft. I had a boyfriend. All the bills were getting paid. The pets were being fed. I was in a relationship. Everything looked like it was okay. The panic attack hit, and I thought that all of that could go away in a month. I was going to be living in my car in a month, and all of the planning and all of the plan Bs were not going to work. And when you're in a constant state of fear and you can't see a way to feel safe, that makes you start to think there's no real reason to continue existing. And that's why a lot of veterans with PTSD, it's on average, the statistics vary, but anywhere from 10 to 20 veteran suicides a day, because PTSD takes hope. It takes hope away. It takes away the ability to feel joy, because you're just in a constant state of fear and lack of control. And so after that 1 year, I was no longer suicidal. I knew that there was a future, and I had the capacity to start feeling joy. I had the capacity for it. I can't say I was full of joy or anything of that sort, but I had the capacity to kind of laugh at things again. What I like to say is that year for me took care of like the capital T traumas, or the incredibly debilitating trauma. I continued, and that's where I wrote a memoir about that year, and I stopped the memoir at the end of that third journey because technically I no longer qualified for a PTSD diagnosis. But I would be disingenuous if I said to folks that my mental health journey was at an end. I mean, I grew up 19 years of neglect and physical abuse. So I have continued to unwind my trauma in the subsequent years. But the difference is that I was no longer suicidal. I saw a future, and I saw that it was worth continuing to unwind that trauma. So I hope that helps explain this. I always really want to make it clear to people, it's not turnkey. And if you put in the work, you can make incredible strides and choose to live your life in a different way, not fueled by fear.
Wow, that's wonderful, and I can see how much people, like, why so many people are reluctant to accept that those powerful drugs can help you. Because imagine you just come to someone you very know, just say, hey, you're suicidal. like just take ecstasy to help you, like it sounds like crazy, but when you put it that way, like in a clinical setting, assisted, like those drugs are powerful for a reason. And like any powerful tool, if you use it in the correct way, it can bring
Yes.
huge benefits, right? So with that said, I would like to explore a little bit the difference between using, let's take MDMA for example, in a clinical setting compared to someone who just goes to a rave and take
Yeah. What's the difference?
of,
The raves are so much fun, right? Yeah.
yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
my
I think that's a
question,
great question.
yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, take it away. So what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the main difference? So for anybody who hasn't taken ecstasy or Molly, or MDMA, what it is, it's not a traditional psychedelic. It doesn't give you, at least at therapeutic doses, it doesn't give you any sort of beautiful visuals or anything of that sort, which is why it's so popular as a party drug, because instead of beautiful visuals, you get a release of serotonin and dopamine, which make you want to connect, make it so that you trust people. You like being in a group, lots of like feel good vibes. Some people will say that MDMA feels like a nice, lovely hug with a warm blanket that just came out of the dryer. Like it's that kind of lovely feeling for folks. And again, I'm not talking crazy dosing. I'm talking like a moderate dose of MDMA, party, have fun kind of stuff. A therapeutic dose of MDMA is a basic dose when you start, and then about an hour in, depending on how the client is responding to the medicine, potentially a booster. But it never goes over 200 milligrams in a therapeutic environment. Okay. Secondly, for a trauma patient, what MDMA does is, and I always put my hands on my shoulders when I talk about this, because I think like for that year, like my shoulders were up to my ears. I was very tense. And what MDMA does is it calms the fear response in the body. So your physical body no longer feels like you're at the edge of a cliff and the danger of falling, or your body is being chased by, some lion or tiger or something of that sort. Your body feels relaxed. And when your body feels relaxed, you can start to tap into some really tough emotions that normally your body would stop you from wanting to feel because they're too scary. So the example I give is that for the first time, that very first journey, for the first time, I told two people, my therapist and my guide, who at that time was a medical doctor, that I knew with certainty that if my father was in the room, he would have his hands around my neck trying to kill me. That's how scared I was of my father. And being able to finally talk about that and start to process that fear without my body kind of seizing up and freaking out, it allows the patient to start processing and say, hey, wait a minute. I'm, at the time I was like 47, 48. I'm not a little kid anymore. If my father showed up in this room, he's not going to have his hands around my neck because he'd have a real problem on his hands. So you get to have a perspective shift that stops the story from childhood. When I was a child, he absolutely could have killed me. As an adult, with his bare hands, a little bit more of a challenge. So you start to have that perspective shift. And so that's what it does for a patient. It calms their body down enough for them to start to tackle some really, really hard emotions from their past.
I see. And you would be talking to the therapist while in this relaxed state.
Yeah, you can use the term enhanced if you'd like
Enhanced.
an enhanced state, because your subconscious is kind of wide open. And MDMA therapy, when you look online and you see pictures, you very often see three people. You see the patient with an eye mask on and two people kind of sitting. I think it depends on the client, because like for me, I am, I'm a talker. So I talk. Yep, there you go. You got it. Yep. So that's a not uncommon way for therapy to look throughout the cycle. Remember, an MDMA cycle can be anywhere from 5 to 8 hours. So sometimes you're sitting back with an eye mask and letting the medicine work. Sometimes you're sitting there chatting. And my doctors were great. We actually voice recorded. We had a technical glitch with the second one, but we voice recorded 2 out of 3 of my sessions. And when you listen to yourself, not slurring your words, you don't sound drunk. It's just amazing when you're talking to your doctors, when you're having a conversation, how lucid you are. And yet it's totally your subconscious, like wide open. So it's definitely a mix for what some people like. Some people might want to sit with the eye mask and some music the whole time. Me, I'm super chatty. I'm sure you can tell. So I like to do a lot of talking.
Yeah, that's perfect. But so why exactly do you guys record it? Does it happen that you sometimes forget about the sessions?
1,000%.
Oh,
My first journey was about 5-ish hours because we did a low dose, and I was also like, my inner children were like not sure about this. You don't remember most of it. I remember coming out of the 5 hours and I was like, but I think it's only been like a half an hour or 45 minutes. No, you don't remember. And it's a beautiful, listening to the recording later is a beautiful way to understand how you've been looking at the world. So I always encourage people, if you're doing some medicine work therapeutically, don't video record. It'll eat up all the space on your phone, but you can voice record, and that really is you can transcribe it later. It's a beautiful tool for healing.
wow, but 5 hours, that's a lot. So you started with small dose and gradually increased the dose.
Right. Yeah, the
Oh,
first journey with MDMA for a trauma patient is all about learning that the medicine and the environment is safe.
mm,
So, in my experience and with some classes I've taken, there's no downside to having a lower dose the very first time to let the client understand what it's like, how it's going to feel, and then moving forward, deciding if the dose should increase.
I see. Okay. Do you ever feel the need? I mean, it sounds like you're completely healed now, right? Would you say that you ever feel the need to do it again? Like right now, do you see yourself doing it again in the future?
Well, so that's why I was so careful with the this healed the debilitating trauma, and I had more.
Oh,
So I worked with my doctors 2 additional times after that because I didn't have debilitating fear. I had, why am I still scared of certain things kind of fear. And we didn't work with MDMA at that point because I was not in a trauma state. We worked with psilocybin. And then as things happened, my facilitators actually moved out of my area. And so I continued to work on myself in that therapeutic relationship, long distance. And I've used psychedelic tourism to understand how different psychedelics work with trauma. And in that process, yeah, I've hit, it's funny how I use this term. I've hit rock bottom in the trauma to heal. And it was actually recently, it was only like 2 months ago that like I finally hit a trauma point when I was 5 that I didn't even know existed. That I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to get so deep to heal it. For me, it's been an ongoing process. When you've been marinated in abuse and neglect, there's a lot to heal. My mother shot herself when I was 5. And that was a big trauma point that I thought I had healed and really hadn't. So I always encourage people, the same way you go to the gym and you keep working on your body, I encourage people, there's no reason every couple of months to work on yourself therapeutically with psychedelics in a safe environment.
I see. Because you mentioned it's not regulated. But is it illegal? Because I know that in the US, especially as every state has different laws, it's completely different. So it's very confusing for me. How does that work out in the US?
Yeah, to be super candid with everybody who's listening, I am talking about Schedule 1 drugs that are
Ah,
predominantly illegal in the US. Colorado and Colorado and Oregon both are very progressive in terms of psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and psilocybin therapy. So like in Oregon, you can go for psilocybin therapy right now. It'll cost you, I think on average, $2,000 to $3,000 because they're trying to figure out regulations and things of that sort. Colorado is coming out in 2025, and oh my gosh, the name of it is escaping me. I'm so sorry. But they're coming out with regulations about how to deliver medicine to folks. We just had a couple of ballots in terms of like Massachusetts is a big one. And I forget the other one. They failed because people don't necessarily understand psychedelics from a therapeutic point of view. So in the US, we've got ketamine that's legal for depression, and we have psilocybin in 2 states. But MDMA right now is still a Schedule I drug. So to be super candid with everybody, this is why you can't Google, let me find MDMA-assisted psychotherapist, because it's illegal.
Well, good to know. I know here in Germany, weed just got legalized, but it's like in a super controlled way. You can only buy weed if you become member of one of the groups. Like here in Germany, like every city has like this. It's called Verein. I think the correct translation would be club. So you have the chess club, you have the archery club, and now for the first time legally there's the weed club, which you can register, and if you become a member, they do a background check on you, of course, and everything's okay. You can get some seeds and plant at your own house. There's limits on how much you can plant.
Oh, lovely.
But yeah, we're making progress little by little.
We're making odd progress with cannabis too. Different states are at different levels. And I think my guess is that's part of the concern with psychedelics. Like in the US, the cannabis stuff was not rolled out well.
Oh.
And I don't think I don't know who the magic they are. I don't think legislators want the craziness of the cannabis rollout to be repeated with psychedelics. So there's a lot of hand wringing right now about how to do this well and to keep people safe, because high doses of psychedelics can be very, very dangerous for folks. So rightly so, people are kind of tiptoeing into this.
Yeah, for sure. And I know people that with weed, they developed what I would say psychosis or bipolar disorder. I don't know. But in some folks, it does happen. Whatever it is, why it happens, I don't know. But like just weed, a drug that many would say it's like very light, right? Compared to other things that we discussed. And so it's important to treat it carefully, yeah.
I think it's important for folks to understand that psychedelics or psychoactive chemicals, weed, can sometimes emphasize. So if you have, I'll pick on my father. He's deceased. He doesn't know I'm picking on him. My father had a narcissistic personality disorder. I don't really believe that psychedelics would have helped him unless he really, really wanted it. It would be more likely that in some way, shape, or form, the psychedelic experience would emphasize his narcissism. So you have to be super careful. And I have heard stories of cannabis and a psychosis, and I'm not sure that there's a screening method for that yet. I would definitely look at family history. I would definitely look at your mental state before coming to a particular substance. But it's a possibility. So, you have to really tread lightly.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't there like a phrase or a quote that goes like the intention and the mood dictates the whole experience? Do you know what I'm talking about? What is the saying? I forgot.
The saying is set, mindset, and setting where you are and who you're with.
Yeah. This dictates the whole thing. And I think that ties back a little bit to what we were talking earlier about the rave, right? Versus the clinical aspect of the whole thing.
Very much so, yes. And I think that's also why sometimes you hear these horrible, horrible stories, these folks giving you these stories of horrendous psychedelic experiences. You don't know what they've taken beforehand. You don't know what their mental state was. You don't know who they were with. Most of the time, it's like, well, I was at this party and, not a particularly safe place. So the same way that when somebody tells you a story about alcohol, there goes a bar fight out in the so-and-so. And usually your question is, well, what happened? What caused that? Nobody says, oh, it's only because you got drunk. Usually there's some sort of underlying reason. Mm-hmm. And that's the same logic when somebody tells you a crazy story about what happened to them on a psychedelic. Who were you with? What was already in your system? What was your mental state? Those are all factors. And what was the dosage? A 1 gram magic mushroom journey is going to be way different than a 5 gram mushroom journey. And very often people just kind of like grab a handful and don't know what they're taking. I'm not a proponent of that. I'm a proponent of know what you're taking in a safe place and be mentally ready for that.
Perfect. Did you hear that, everyone? Listen well. Jill, I really like that you mentioned about mushrooms today on Instagram. I just saw this random ad saying that some people are replacing coffee with mushrooms. And I think they meant like they're microdosing throughout the day with some type of mushroom coffee. Do you know anything about that?
The mushroom coffees I know are usually like a beautiful lion's mane or some other mushrooms. Paul Stamets talks about different mushrooms and how they can non-psychedelic mushrooms that are great for. Oh my gosh, the word has escaped me. Great for clarity, brain clarity, and people go read about Paul Stamets and his different mushroom blends, because I just did a terrible summary of it.
Oh, isn't that the guy that was on Joe Rogan, has like the mushroom cap and everything?
Yes.
I love that guy. I think I watched his show, like this episode 2 times already. So interesting, like his love for mushrooms, like it's incredible.
Yeah, he's definitely has an overgrown interest in mushrooms. But with his interest in mushrooms, he's done a lot of citizen research, and he's got a Stamets stack. I've never tried it. That is apparently great for mental clarity and growth. When you're talking about microdosing a psychedelic, like microdosing mushrooms, it's a I forget that word. You can't even feel it. Like if you've got a 1 gram journey, you're going to feel that. If you have a 0.01 gram microdose, you're not going to feel that. You're not supposed to feel that. What microdosing is supposed to do is help with neuroplasticity. I'm in Third Wave Psychedelic Coaching Program, and they actually encourage a microdosing regimen after a macro dose journey. So like a 2 or 3 gram mushroom journey for some sort of coaching or therapeutic process, following that up with a microdosing protocol to continue the neuroplasticity benefits. And I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard that approach before.
Sounds very interesting, but I would assume so, like everything over time, your body adapts. So if 0.1 milligrams is working now, maybe in 1 month time or 2 months time, that won't be the case, and then you're gonna always need to have higher and higher doses.
No. Yeah, no, you were on the right track. But what's interesting about magic mushrooms is that your body adapts to them and they start to lose impact. It's a beautiful way to have a substance that completely, you don't get addicted to magic mushrooms because they just stop working. So what you do with a microdosing, so like a macro dose every 3 months of magic mushrooms, doing magic mushrooms every single week, it's eventually not going to do anything for you. But every 2-3 months is a beautiful clear the cobwebs, keep doing work. With microdosing, every microdose protocol talks about a period of time and then a period of time off, and then a period of time and a period of time off. That's how you work with mushrooms. Even the Stamets stack talks about a couple of days on, a couple of days off, so that you don't build it up in your body and it stops being effective.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that sounds smart. That sounds a good way of approaching it. If you're microdosing or taking mushrooms every single day, like what do you expect?
You just kind
So
of lose. Yeah, you don't increase the dose. That'll actually have the opposite effect. Like it'll just stop working. So you take
yeah,
you take off. It's a really interesting. It's an interesting way to think about medicine in the West.
yeah.
We don't think of medicine that way.
No, of course not. But
Yeah.
man, this whole conversation is so interesting. I had a guest the other day. He said that some of scientists speculates that some humans will start living up to 500 years in a couple of years. I don't know about that. Maybe 120, 150. I don't know. But I can see how this is possible because, like, over time, humanity starts finding all of the, I don't want to say loopholes or like cheats. I don't know. Let's say healthier ways of approaching life, right? If you take TRT, for example, I know you can, after 40, your body doesn't produce enough testosterone, so you take TRT in healthy doses and you take breaks like we're talking about the psychedelics, and you just stay healthy for way longer. Your body just stay healthy for way longer without any implications. It's just something that is good for you. And I can see how all of those psychedelics, let's take mushrooms we're talking right now, like in microdosing in a certain periods of time, and then you take a break and then you go back to it like this. I would assume so will prolong your brain. I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Just make your brain healthy for even much longer. Maybe we'll prevent Alzheimer's and stuff like that. I'm just speculating here. I have no idea about that.
I don't know. I don't know. Yesterday, Jill said, let's think of it a little bit differently. Okay. So when we're learning something new, one of the reasons why we use flashcards and we use memorization and repetition is that if you've got like little neurons in your brains, the more connections you make, the more you think about something, the more you repeat it, the more connections. That's why you practice sports. Repetition, it increases the amount of neural pathways in the brain to make you better at something. What's fascinating about psychedelics is that they kind of disrupt some of the normal pathways. They disrupt what's called the default mode network. You know, when you're just driving the car and you don't even realize you got from point A to point B, kind of that autopilot self, psychedelics disrupt that. And in disrupting it, it kind of creates this opportunity to make different connections, because it's like, oh, those connections, you make new connections. So when you're dealing with a trauma patient, keeping that window of, oh, I can make more connections easier, keeping that window open longer is incredibly, incredibly helpful. And that's one of the reasons why the actual clinical trials for MDMA therapy, they had them spaced per month because they didn't want that neuroplasticity window to kind of close up. They wanted to keep it open and continue to give more therapy. It's an actual fascinating process when I explain to people that healing trauma is actually relearning the truth about the situation that caused you trauma. Me thinking I wasn't worth anything and the universe was a bad place because my father beat me up routinely, the MDMA therapy kind of broke that way of thinking, and I was able to realize, wait a minute, it wasn't me as a bad person or a bad child. This was my father not being able to regulate himself and his own trauma. And making those connections and learning kind of the truth that you can then see as an adult, that's the actual healing process of trauma.
I see.
I know, I freaked you out. I know when all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, I can just think differently about things. With psychedelic-assisted therapy, it's one of the main ways that you heal trauma because you suddenly think about things way differently.
So you reframe the narrative, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I bring specialists. Everyone, forget everything I said about Alzheimer's. Doesn't make any sense.
I'm sure there's some research out there, but I'm not aware of that research.
Yeah.
I kind of stick to my lane of trauma.
Of
But wouldn't it be
course.
wonderful?
Yeah, of course. So it reframes the narrative and not in turning key moment. What was the term again? Turning key.
So it's not, if you think about how long it takes us to learn something,
Yeah.
think of how long it takes to unlearn something. That's why psychedelics are not turnkey. They're not immediate. They give you the opportunity to start learning about your past differently. And sometimes there's like amazing insights. It does seem to be really fast, especially like 2 or 3 days after a journey. But fundamentally, to make those things stick, you do have to put meditation time in, journaling time, anything repetition for your brain is what you really need to do to make it stick.
With MDMA, because I heard that with ayahuasca, I'm not sure if you know much about it, but I heard that it's like so potent, like it's life changing to some people, and it does sound like it's like a turning key moment for many people. I don't know about that. Do you have any experience on this drug?
So DMT, so I haven't done ayahuasca yet because I don't want to throw up, but I've done Bufo, 5-MeO, DMT, Iboga, Cambo, LSD, so, and obviously psilocybin and MDMA. So what happens to folks during journeys is they see patterns, they get a revelation. They're like, oh, wait a minute. My father was a jerk. Okay. My father was a jerk. Say that that's a revelation that, oh my gosh, I'm totally worthy of living this life. The same way you would get that the couple of days after an MDMA journey. It just kind of happens in a very spiritual, beautiful way. And in ayahuasca, a DMT experience for most people is completely different than anything they've ever experienced in their lives. So they're like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. The integration, the time after that ayahuasca journey is where you need to solidify those thoughts. Every single psychedelic works the same way in that you have to put the time in after to really think about what you learned, to reframe those perspectives. If you just go back to your regular life, you're like, oh, well, I had a great time and it was amazing what it showed me. And if you don't put time in to really changing the way you think about things, it's not going to be nearly as powerful. It's kind of like a wasted opportunity.
I see. Then you're just tourists, right?
It's a beautiful way of saying it. Yep.
All right. Okay. Wow, that's mind blowing. I'm really loving this episode, Jill. So you're very passionate about the subject, of course. You share your journey and how you can inspire people to find hope and you also awareness. Do you also assist people?
Yep.
So
Yep.
if they wanna go through this process, they can reach out to you.
Well, so I'm in Third Wave's psychedelic coaching program.
Oh.
And because I'm not a trained therapist.
Okay.
So very often I have people reach out to me who are either in crisis or unfortunately have very similar stories that I have, like child abuse. And I'm always very careful to make sure that they find folks that are properly resourced and educated for that. It would be completely unethical for me to really work with that population because I'm not a therapist. Okay. The population that I work with is, I've got some sort of block. I have to make a decision. I don't know why I'm fighting this promotion at work. What am I going to do in retirement? This family thing is really bothering me. I don't know why. Like, I'm very much the transition kind of person. And I will be graduating my coaching program in March and be opening up my doors to kind of make this an official thing. Everything so far has been, me just kind of helping people out. But I'm looking forward to opening the doors on that and then actually designing some kind of like leadership and life change retreats kind of thing. That's my future, I believe.
Wow, congratulations. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So where people can find you, how can they reach out to you? I know that you also wrote a book, right?
Yeah. So I'm the Journey Sage, thejourneysage.com, because I teach about the journey. And you can find me on my website. You can find me on YouTube, all the social media things. On my website, I've got a little calendar link. You're free to kind of book some time with me if you'd like. And the books, the memoir is about that year of healing. And I'll warn you, if you have also experienced child abuse, you get the book. It makes sense. If you haven't experienced child abuse, you're kind of like, wow, this is really repetitive. Why is she talking about her dad again? So I always warn people. And then I also have a workbook that if you are interested in psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, maybe you're going to go to a retreat where these substances are legal and you want to prepare. I have a little workbook that basically copies the 8 different ways that my therapist and I kind of worked on different intentions. So you get to kind of cheat and be in a therapy session with my therapist through the workbook. So those are the 2 resources. And the one that we use the most, the body, like what is the body telling you? That's free on my website. Anybody can grab that.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. While you're talking, I just had this amazing idea. Do you do it online sessions? You assist people via the web?
With MDMA. MDMA online is actually a beautiful, beautiful, as long as they have somebody kind of in the next room or 10 minutes away, it's a beautiful way. Not so much other medicines where somebody can kind of, start to roll around and fall or that kind of stuff. But MDMA remotely is very doable. It actually helps some people because they feel nice and safe in their own house. There's a growing number of practitioners who are doing that.
Wow, that's wonderful. Jill, thanks so much. We're going to make sure to leave the links on the description below. Do you have any final remarks, anything else before we say goodbye?
Usually my ending remarks are, if you got this far and you're interested, go take a look at the clinical research. In the States, we have FDA approval for MDMA, psilocybin, and for LSD. And I'm sorry, not FDA approval, FDA breakthrough therapy designation, which moves those drugs through the process quicker. And treatment-resistant depression and anxiety are on like the top of the list for research around those drugs. So if you want to learn more, go take a look at the clinical research to see what's evolving. That's usually my best advice for folks.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. If it's your first time watching this show, please subscribe because then you might win this awesome cap. It's that easy. We're going to announce the giveaway, the winners of the giveaway at the end of January 2025. We did one of those giveaways already. It was a huge success. We're doing it again. It's super easy to enter. Just subscribe. That's about it. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jill. It was wonderful to get to know you. See you next time. Bye.
We're good.
Thank you so much
it still
for
says
hanging out
on
with
air.
us today. If it's your first time watching the show, make sure to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
That's why I always ask. I never want to click out and ruin an upload.
This will ensure that the podcast is recommended to even more people and allow me to keep doing what I love. Check out now the Brewcast store, Explore store, filled with awesome goodies from hoodies to t-shirts to mugs. We've got you covered.
Yeah.
Stay in style with Brewcast. Embrace the shock. Set the trend. Buy now at brew-cast.com/store. Again, that's brew-cast.com.
Our Veterans Association was very upset that the FDA delayed, and they are sponsoring their own clinical trials right now. They just got a $1.5 million grant to run their own trials because they've always said unless the FDA legalizes it, they can't use it for veterans. But I think their management, they were pretty horrified at the delay from the FDA on our side.
Pictures at the end of every episode.
Yeah, and there's a lot of groups
right now.
VETS will actually have scholarships for vets who are having money problems and are really severely PTSD laden for them to go overseas and go to like a psilocybin retreat for some help.